On February 5th, 2016, a sound like an explosion echoed through Lower Manhattan. A crane, a towering giant of steel and engineering, had folded in on itself and slammed into the streets below. Cars were crushed, buildings damaged, and one man lost his life. What unfolded wasn't just an accident. It was a $20 million disaster that exposed the real reason this engineering giant failed. This is the story of the crane collapse of February 5th, 2016, a tragedy that turned Worth Street into a construction graveyard, claimed a life, and forced New York City to rewrite the rulebook on crane safety forever. Before we dive into the collapse, we need to understand the machine at the center of it all. This wasn't your average crane you see lifting steel beams on small sites. The Liebherr LR1300SX was a titan. 200 tons of German-engineered steel designed to lift the kind of loads that make skyscrapers possible. Think of it less like construction equipment and more like a mechanical colossus. Its stats read like a brag sheet. A maximum lifting capacity of 330 US tons. Counterweights weighing nearly 200 tons keep it balanced. A main boom that could stretch over 465 feet, and when paired with its luffing jib, could reach 561 feet, almost the same height as the Washington Monument. Add in an operator cab with climate control and a state-of-the-art monitoring system feeding live data on wind speeds, angles, and pressure, and you have a machine built for precision and safety. Price tag? Around $3 million. In other words, this wasn't just a tool, it was an investment, trusted on the world's most demanding job sites. But machines, no matter how advanced, don't operate in a vacuum. They exist in the real world, where nature and human judgment collide. And on that February morning, the collision was catastrophic. Snow drifted lazily over Lower Manhattan, but it wasn't the snow that made it dangerous. It was the wind. Sustained speeds had reached 20 miles per hour, with gusts climbing past 25. Any crane operator knows that wind is the silent enemy. It can turn steel into sails and physics into a nightmare. By 8 a.m., the crew knew they had a problem. The LR1300SX stood high above the street, its boom extended. The protocol was clear. In high winds, the boom had to come down. And so the process began. The operator, a seasoned professional, began the slow lowering. But here's where physics turned brutal. As the boom angled downward, its vast lattice surface acted like a sail. Instead of stability, it caught the gusts. The crane began to swivel, weather vaning into the wind. What should have been a safe maneuver suddenly became uncontrollable. Inside that cab, the operator must have been fighting tooth and nail to steady the beast. But wind doesn't bargain, and steel doesn't forgive. In seconds, the side force overwhelmed the crane's design. A terrifying groan of metal echoed through the street as the boom bent, buckled, and snapped. What followed was a domino collapse, one section folding into the next until the entire 200-ton structure came crashing down. It took less than 10 seconds for engineering perfection to become twisted wreckage sprawled across Worth Street. Parked cars were flattened like soda cans. Historic buildings suffered heavy damage. Underground gas and water lines were ruptured. And most heartbreaking of all, David Wex, a Harvard-educated mathematician walking to work, was killed instantly when debris crushed a car near him. A city that thrives on motion was suddenly frozen in silence. So how does destruction like this add up to $20 million? Let's break it down, not with cold numbers, but with the story behind each cost. First, the crane itself. At around $3 million, it was declared a total loss. That's the price of precision machinery, gone in seconds. Then came the cleanup. And this wasn't as simple as hauling scrap. We're talking about 200 tons of mangled steel blocking a major New York street. Specialized crews had to cut it apart piece by piece, using other cranes and trucks in bitter February weather. That alone cost millions. Next came the collateral damage. Cars were destroyed, facades of historic buildings ripped open, underground utilities severed. Each repair carried its own hefty bill. And while workers scrambled to restore infrastructure, Worth Street was shut down for more than a week. Imagine the ripple effect. Businesses lost income, deliveries stalled, and a major construction project was delayed. Then there's the human cost that can't be measured in spreadsheets. David Witch's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit, and millions were paid in settlement. Other lawsuits followed. Property owners, business owners, and insurance claims piling high. By the time you combine all of this, the destroyed crane, cleanup, infrastructure repair, lost revenue, and legal payouts, the $20 million figure suddenly doesn't feel exaggerated at all. It feels painfully real. But out of every disaster comes a reckoning. New York City was left staring at one painful question: how do you stop this from happening again? Investigators dug deep, and their findings reshaped crane operations across the city. Before this collapse, the rules said cranes had to stop work at 30 miles per hour winds. Sounds reasonable, right? Except the crash proved otherwise. The city lowered the threshold drastically. Now, crawler cranes must stop at 20 miles per hour, sustained winds, and if gusts hit 30 miles per hour, the boom must be secured immediately. Technology also stepped in. Every crane of this size now requires an anemometer to constantly record wind speeds, with the data accessible to city inspectors. No more relying on judgment calls. Numbers decide safety now. Beyond that, new rules require detailed site-specific plans whenever cranes were moved or repositioned. Every action had to be pre-approved, leaving no room for improvisation when lives were at stake. It wasn't just about one accident. It was about rewriting the safety culture of an entire industry, an industry where one mistake could level city blocks. For New York, a city of 8 million souls, this wasn't just a tragedy, it was a wake-up call. A reminder that when you gamble with physics and fate, the stakes are far higher than money. They're measured in lives. Looking back, the collapse wasn't the failure of the machine. The LR1300SX was as advanced and reliable as cranes come. What failed was the system around it, the protocols, the weather judgment, and the risk tolerance. The Worst Street tragedy exposed the thin line between control and chaos, and it forced construction companies and regulators alike to face a harsh truth. When you're working with giants of steel, even the smallest miscalculation can cost millions or a life. So here's the takeaway. That morning in 2016 wasn't just about a crane crash. It was about how human decisions interact with nature and machines. It was about how safety rules written in manuals sometimes collapse in real-world conditions. And it was about the price, financial, emotional, and societal, of learning those lessons too late. Today, when a crane stretches over Manhattan's skyline, the ghost of that disaster lingers. Every operator knows that behind the dials and data, behind the counterweights and cables, lies responsibility measured not in tons but in lives. A $20 million bill was the wake-up call, but David Witch's life has a cost that can never be repaid. The next time you pass by a construction site and glance up at those cranes cutting the skyline, remember this story. Behind the steel and power lies fragility. Behind the booming construction industry lies risk. And behind every regulation written in the aftermath lies a family who paid the price for its absence. That's the real reason the 200-ton crane came crashing down in New York City. Not because steel suddenly gave way, not because the machine betrayed its design, but because risk itself was underestimated. In the heart of Manhattan, one miscalculation turned a symbol of progress into a weapon of destruction, proving that even giants of steel are powerless against human error. Stay safe, stay aware, and if you found this breakdown eye-opening, make sure to subscribe and stick around.